know how hard it is to get out of it, you know. And you know, at the age of 5, I discovered that I can sing, so I just went on and went on and went on, and you know, until you know, I found.
The music world is in complete shock today as heartbreaking news emerges about Journey's lead vocalist, Arnel Pineda. The Filipino singer, whose incredible rags to riches journey inspired millions when he joined the legendary rock band in 2007, has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in a San Francisco courtroom. This marks not just the end of an extraordinary career, but the tragic conclusion of one of music's most remarkable success stories. What's truly astonishing is not just the severity of the sentence, but how quickly everything unraveled once the first allegations came to light, says veteran music journalist Maria Rodriguez, who has followed Journey's career since its early days. This shocking turn of events comes at a time when Journey was experiencing a major career resurgence, with their sold-out arena tours drawing in new generations of fans thanks to streaming platforms and television placements. However, sources close to the band confirm that their upcoming world tour has been canceled immediately, with millions in ticket sales now being refunded. The music industry is still grappling with the devastating news, and the financial consequences are immense. But the real tragedy goes beyond money, reveals a senior executive at Live Nation speaking anonymously. The most painful impact is on the victims whose lives were forever changed, as well as the band members and crew who are now left without work. For those unfamiliar with the highly publicized case that has dominated headlines for months, Pineda's downfall began with what seemed to be a minor legal complaint. However, as authorities investigated further, they uncovered what prosecutors described as a pattern of predatory behavior, carefully hidden behind the uplifting public image that had made him a global inspiration. To fully understand the weight of these revelations, one must first revisit Pineda's rise to fame, a story so unbelievable it could have been written for a Hollywood film. Born into poverty in Manila, Pineda spent years living on the streets, sleeping in parks, and scraping together money by performing in small clubs across the Philippines. His voice was his only treasure, says former bandmate Roger Santos. No matter how bad things got, he could always sing with incredible power and emotion. It was like hearing Steve Perry reborn in the body of a small Filipino man who had never caught a break in life. Everything changed in 2007 when Journey's guitarist Neil Sean discovered YouTube videos of Pineda flawlessly performing Journey covers. In urgent need of a new lead singer after Steve Perry's departure, the band took a huge leap of faith by selecting an unknown artist from halfway across the world. It was a real-life fairy tale, says music historian Dr. James Wilson. A homeless kid from Manila suddenly became the frontman of one of America's most legendary rock bands, playing to massive crowds and moving fans who had initially doubted anyone could replace Steve Perry. His early performances with the band were electrifying, and you could literally see the audience go from skepticism to admiration in real time. Pineda's arrival revitalized Journey. Their 2008 album Revelation achieved platinum status, and their global tours consistently ranked among the highest grossing in the industry. His inspiring story was further immortalized in the documentary Don't Stop Believin'. Every man's journey, solidifying his place as the ultimate underdog who defied the odds. Pineda's popularity wasn't just due to his remarkable voice, says former tour manager Michael Chin, but also his humility, gratitude, and deep appreciation for the opportunity he had received. He never appeared to take a single moment for granted. However, a carefully built image has now been shattered, leaving fans across the world struggling to reconcile the inspiring figure they once admired with the predator described in court. The investigation began in 2022 when a former member of Journey's Road crew filed a civil lawsuit accusing Pineda of abusive behavior backstage during the band's 2019 tour. Initially, the complaint focused on verbal harassment and intimidation, but as the case unfolded, more disturbing allegations surfaced. What seemed like a routine workplace issue quickly escalated into something far more serious, explained lead prosecutor Rebecca Williams. As word of the lawsuit spread, more individuals came forward with similar experiences spanning several years, stories they had previously kept to themselves out of fear of Pineda's power and influence in the industry. Prosecutors presented evidence suggesting that Pineda had allegedly used his status to prey on vulnerable young women who attended Journey concerts, particularly in Asia and South America, where he was especially revered. Former security staff testified about a system in which certain fans were identified and escorted backstage under the pretense of meeting the band. There was a specific code used by some members of the entourage, recalled former security guard James Martinez. Particular descriptions, specific terminology, those of us who played a role in organizing these meetings convinced ourselves it was just typical rock star behavior, but deep down we knew something wasn't right. The most damning testimony came from several women who had been brought backstage as teenagers during Journey's tours in the Philippines, where Pineda was celebrated as a national hero. Their accounts revealed a pattern of manipulation that exploited both their youth and their admiration for a man who symbolized success in their struggling communities. He told me he saw himself in me, that I had the same hunger for success that he once had, testified one woman identified as Jane Doe number 3. He promised to help me escape poverty just like he had. I trusted him completely. He wasn't just a musician to me. He was proof that someone like me could succeed against all odds. As the allegations mounted, Journey's remaining members found themselves in an increasingly difficult position. Initially, they released a statement supporting Pineda while calling for a thorough investigation. However, as more evidence surfaced and additional victims came forward, their stance became untenable. A particularly emotional testimony left the courtroom in shock. Jonathan Cain, the band's keyboardist, recalled the moment he grasped the gravity of the situation. He stated that the evidence presented to them was undeniable and could neither be ignored nor explained away. Cain testified that this was not a case of misinterpretation or someone's words being distorted. What they witnessed was devastating and completely contradicted the image they had of the person they once knew. Neil Sean, who had played a pivotal role in discovering Pineda and launching his career, appeared visibly shaken throughout the trial. In his brief testimony, he spoke of the immense sense of responsibility he felt, saying, "I brought Arnel into this world, into this level of fame and access." Sean admitted that he constantly questioned whether he could have noticed something earlier, taken action, or somehow prevented what had happened. Former Journey frontman Steve Perry, who had largely remained silent regarding his successor's success, broke his silence with a written statement that was read in court. "My heart breaks for everyone affected by these terrible actions," Perry's statement read. He expressed his devastation upon learning that Journey's music, meant to inspire hope, love, and perseverance, had been misused in such a harmful way. In response to the revelations, the band announced the immediate termination of Pineda's contract. They also pledged to create a fund for the victims, committing a significant portion of the royalties from Pineda's era to organizations supporting survivors of sexual abuse. The turning point in the case came when prosecutors presented overwhelming physical evidence alongside victim testimonies, which ultimately led to conviction. Digital forensic experts successfully retrieved deleted messages, photos, and videos from Pineda's electronic devices. These findings provided disturbing corroboration of the victims' accounts. This case wasn't built on testimony alone, explained criminal defense attorney Sarah Johnson, who closely followed the trial. She noted that prosecutors had gathered location data, communication records, and financial transactions that established a clear pattern of behavior, one the defense was unable to refute. One of the most incriminating pieces of evidence was a series of journal entries recovered from Pineda's personal computer. These writings allegedly recorded in coded language detailing his encounters with fans. FBI analysts testified that the entries contained descriptions that aligned with the victim's statements down to specific locations and physical characteristics. "These weren't just musings of a celebrity documenting fan interactions," said FBI analyst Thomas. "The case against Arnel Pan contained deliberate references to vulnerability manipulation techniques and strategies for ensuring silence, with the calculated nature of these writings being one of the most unsettling aspects of the case." Additionally, prosecutors introduced financial records showing payments made to multiple individuals through an intricate network of intermediaries. These transactions corresponded precisely with the timeline of the alleged incidents, further solidifying the prosecution's argument. During his testimony, former Journey business manager Robertson stated that he had facilitated the payments under the impression that they were goodwill gestures to fans or compensation for backstage assistance. "I never questioned why these payments were being made," Chin admitted, explaining that in the music industry, It is common for celebrities to compensate individuals for various services without much explanation. Only in hindsight do I realize how my actions contributed to facilitating and concealing this behavior, he reflected. Throughout the trial, Pan consistently asserted his innocence. His defense team argued that the allegations stemmed from misunderstandings or consensual interactions that were now being reinterpreted through a modern lens. Attorney Michael Coleman depicted Pan as a scapegoat for behavior that was once tolerated within the industry, but is now condemned. Arnel Pan rose from extreme poverty to worldwide fame solely through his remarkable talent and dedication, Coleman stated. He has always been generous to fans, charitable organizations, and his community in the Philippines. The defense claimed that the prosecution was distorting routine fan interactions to appear sinister, relying on selective evidence and testimony from individuals with financial motives. Pan's defense also highlighted his extensive philanthropic work, including a foundation that provided educational opportunities for underprivileged children in Manila. They called numerous fans to testify, many of whom spoke about their respectful and positive interactions with him over the years. When Pan took the stand, he appeared far more vulnerable than his usual energetic stage presence. Speaking in his accented English, he firmly denied the most serious accusations, but acknowledged that fame had sometimes led to complex situations with fans. "I know what it means to have nothing, to feel invisible," Pan said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I would never abuse my position to harm others, because I remember every day what it felt like to be powerless. These accusations contradict everything I have stood for my entire life." Despite these arguments, the jury remained unconvinced. After deliberating for just 11 hours, they returned a guilty verdict on all major counts. As the decision was announced, witnesses described Pan collapsing in his seat, his small frame seeming to shrink further as the weight of the verdict settled in. "It was like watching someone physically change before our eyes," observed courtroom reporter Diana Mitchell. The magnetic performer who once commanded stadium audiences was suddenly gone, replaced by a shattered man who appeared to age decades in mere seconds. The sentencing hearing the following week was equally intense. Several victims shared emotional impact statements, detailing how their experiences with Pan had altered their lives and their relationship with the music they once cherished. "Journey's songs were the soundtrack to every major moment in my life," one victim recalled. "Now those same songs trigger panic attacks and flashbacks. He didn't just take my sense of security. He took away the music that once brought me the greatest comfort." When given a chance to address the court before sentencing, Pan rose slowly and spoke in a barely audible voice, a stark contrast to the powerful vocals that had once filled arenas worldwide. "I came from nothing," he said, his words barely above a whisper. He started from sleeping in parks and singing for spare change just to survive. Perhaps success came too quickly and too overwhelmingly for someone with his background to handle responsibly. He never meant to cause harm, but acknowledged that damage was done, and for that, he expressed deep remorse. However, Judge Eleanor Ramirez remained unmoved by Pan's statement as she handed down the maximum sentence. She emphasized not only the gravity of his crimes, but also what she described as a profound betrayal of the trust placed in him by fans who had seen their own hopes reflected in his journey. "Mr. Pan, your rise from poverty to stardom was an inspiration to millions," Judge Ramirez stated. "That is precisely why your actions are so devastating. You took advantage of the very people who saw you as a symbol of hope and possibility." The court determined that the calculated nature of his actions, his pattern of misconduct, and the severe harm inflicted on multiple victims justified the harshest penalty allowed by law. As Pan was escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs, the music world he had once dominated was left to reckon with the fallout of his disgrace. The band Journey announced that they would continue with a new lead singer, but many within the industry doubted whether they could ever fully recover from their association with Pan's crimes. For the millions of fans who had once embraced Pan's rags-to-riches story, the news was difficult to comprehend. Social media was flooded with posts expressing shock, sorrow, and a sense of betrayal, not just for the victims, but for the loss of a narrative that had provided so much hope. "I believe in Arnel because his story showed that even in the worst circumstances, dreams could come true," one longtime fan wrote in a viral post. To learn that he used that same story to manipulate and harm others feels like losing faith in the idea that good can emerge from struggle. How do we make sense of the inspiration in light of the horror? Arnel Pin's journey from the streets of Manila to a prison cell in San Quentin is one of the most dramatic downfalls in music history. His story, once celebrated as proof that talent and perseverance could overcome any obstacle, now serves as a sobering reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and complexity of seemingly perfect success stories. The tragedy of his case lies in how his background became both his greatest strength and, ultimately, his weapon. His rise from poverty created a kind of protective shield, making early allegations against him seem unbelievable, explained psychologist Dr. Rebecca Torres. Who would suspect that someone who had endured so much suffering would go on to inflict suffering on others? The case has sparked widespread reflection within the music industry about the structures that allow influential figures to abuse their power. In response, several major concert promoters have introduced new backstage regulations and stricter reporting procedures for inappropriate conduct. This isn't just about one individual's crimes, said industry analyst Jennifer Blake. It's forcing the entire industry to confront the culture that allowed this behavior to persist unchecked. The future of Journey's music remains uncertain. Streaming services have reported a significant drop in plays, while radio stations around the world have reduced or removed the band's songs from rotation. Tracks that once symbolized hope and resilience now carry painful associations that many fans find difficult to separate from the scandal. Perhaps the most poignant reaction came from one of the victims who chose to remain anonymous. The saddest part is that Don't Stop Believin' used to be an anthem of hope and perseverance, they said. Now, for me and so many others, it's a reminder to be cautious about who and what we put our faith in. Some journeys aren't what they seem. As the music industry continues to grapple with this shocking downfall, one undeniable truth remains. Arnel Pin's story will forever serve as a lesson that even the most inspiring narratives can hide dark realities, and that no amount of talent or compelling backstory makes someone immune to accountability. The young boy from Manila who once sang for spare change on the streets will now sing only within the confines of a prison. His once celebrated voice has been silenced. To the world that once saw him as the ultimate underdog success story, the journey is over, and the believing has come to an end.